So everybody, Apple finally released iPadOS 17 to the entire public, and even though this might not have the biggest visual changes or feature sets, this is a very great quality of life improvement when it comes to the usability of the iPad Pro, especially as a computer replacement. You guys might know at this point that I love my iPad Pro. I use it as my main form of computing, and this iPadOS 17 update has just solidified how I feel about the iPad even more. Before we deep dive into every single new feature that we found with iPadOS 17, I do want to give you guys a list of the supported devices because this year is a little bit different. So from a holistic standpoint, iPadOS 17 is supported by a few different iPads. So from an iPad Pro standpoint, the first iPad that is supported is the iPad Pro 2nd generation, so long gone is the support from the 2015 12.9-inch iPad Pro. That was the original iPad Pro that came out and gave us that larger form factor, but everything after that is supported by iPadOS 17. For the iPad Airs, you have the iPad Air 3rd gen and newer. For the regular iPad is the iPad 6th gen and newer. And then for the iPad mini, it is the iPad mini 5th gen and newer. So that is the iPads that are supported by iPadOS 17, but there is some segregation in feature sets, which we'll touch on in a little bit. But for things like Stage Manager, you need to have an iPad Pro or an M-powered enabled iPad. And then for something like extended monitor support, your iPad needs to be powered by an M series chip. So iPad Pro M1 and M2 and the iPad Air M1. But now that we got all that housekeeping out of the way, let's go with iPadOS 17 and go through all of its features. Let's get into it. Okay everyone, so let's get right into this video and talk about iPadOS 17 and everything that you get. Now I did mention that there is some segregation in terms of the types of features we get, but we are starting with everything that comes with any single iPad that goes to iPadOS 17. So the first thing that Apple brought over to iPad is the lock screen and lock screen widget. So if you hold down on your actual lock screen, you get the same animation that was brought over with iOS 16, and Apple likes to repackage what they do with iOS and bring it over to iPadOS. So we got the hand-me-down version of a new lock screen. So if we press on this plus button right here, we get a bunch of new stuff here. So new to the iPad. So for instance, we get some featured wallpapers over here like the Unity, Astronomy, Hello. And some of my favorite ones are these dynamic wallpapers and dynamic kind of customizable lock screens. So for instance, the weather wallpaper shows you the actual dynamic weather on your lock screen. So it'll show you that it's actually raining. In my area, it has been raining all day. So if it's a sunny day, it'll show you sunny. When it's nighttime, it'll show the moon, and it'll show that it is kind of nighttime and things like that. So if we press cancel, we can actually go into and see the astronomy ones. Now the astronomy ones are also very, very cool. For instance, if you click on the Earth one, it will pinpoint where you are if you actually share your location. You're able to slide in between and get a little closer with a little extra detail. You have this beautiful moon one that's here. So you do get a nice variety of astrology type wallpapers and lock screen wallpapers, which are great. And again, these are dynamic. So it shows you like what time of day it is, even at different planets and different parts of the moon and lunar calendar. Once you've decided what you actually want to use, I'm going to go back to the actual weather one because that's probably my favorite one. And then of course you have the photo shuffle. But if you want to get into the weather one, like I mentioned, that is a perfect segue into this lock screen. So Apple, again, with iOS 16, they're just bringing over this stuff to iPadOS 17, but you have the ability to add now widgets on the lock screen on the left-hand side, as well as above the clock, and you can actually customize a clock as well. So if I want to actually click on here, you have the ability to customize a clock the same way that you were able to with iOS 16. Very self-explanatory. You pick what you want, you can change the bold of it, how thin it is, change the font style, change the color, and all that good stuff. And then you can also go up here and actually change what it's showing here. So here you have a couple of options. Now it's a small area of what you can actually show, but you can show the weather in different formats. You can show your calendar, you can show the clock. You have your health, which we'll get into in a little bit, which is new also to iPadOS 17. But these are all different things that you can add in terms of a widget above the clock. But you also have the ability to change up the widgets on the left-hand side here. So if you click on this left-hand side, this is kind of like a watered down version of the Today view. Now, for those people that don't know what the Today view is, look up images of iPadOS 13 in the Today view. One of my favorite things that was unbelievably removed on iPadOS 14, it pretty much gave you this widget kind of style look at your actual iPad at a glance. So this gives you the similar idea, but something about the Today view just made you feel like you were using something a little bit different. But the idea is relatively the same. You can add different widgets on here just by tapping them. You can add shortcuts. You can add your little timing to see exactly how much screen time you've been using. And there's a bunch of other ones on here that you can use too. So you can click on the health one. You get some state of mind ones, the medications, home. If you guys want to see a big home summary. So for instance, if I want to do something like, you know, my summary right here, I can just add that. I can add it twice if you want, and then same thing goes. If I want to remove it, I can just start to remove them and kind of modify them however I see fit. These actual widgets will show in landscape and in portrait mode as well. So if I actually grab this and rotate it to actual portrait mode, you can now see that it tries to fit everything only in this little section right here, and it changes, so it's different. So depending on how you set it up in portrait versus landscape mode, that's what it's going to decide on. So we set up the landscape, now let's set up the actual portrait mode. Let's remove these, leave it a little bit more clean. I only want to see what my calendar is doing, so click on that, and we're done, and then that's what it's showing. And again, it does the same thing for the clock, and same thing for that top widget as well. But you know me, I like to use my iPad in landscape mode for 99% of my tasks, and by all means, that's what I like to do. So between the dynamic wallpapers, the new lock screen widgets, Apple is again trying to take a little bit more advantage of the lock screen, because again, this is a 12.9-inch iPad, and Apple was kind of forgetting that you could use it with the lock screen and trying to get some visible data. I'm glad that Apple's bringing that over, and that is how we're using new lock screen widgets. And what's nice about this is that the dynamic wallpaper also works on the actual wallpaper down here in your home screen. So for instance, if I lock it, tap on there, it does give you a nice animation, but as you can see, it does stop. And then again, it doesn't animate itself on the home screen like it does on the lock screen. So now let's get into the actual home screen itself. And with the home screen, very similar. So if you long press on here, we had the ability to add widgets before, but now we have interactive widgets. And a great example of this is the new music widget. So the music widget, especially if you do one of the larger ones, which I like, which is over here. So if you press on this and we press the add widget, this is actually interactable. So I can press on something like Taylor Swift, press play. Well, first I gotta let it happen, but I can press play on the Taylor Swift song and it will start playing, which is nice to see. I'm going to turn that off so we don't get copyrighted, but they are live and interactive widgets. Widgets will now be interactive, and now there's a lot of third-party applications that can take advantage of this. So the things like, again, Things 3, Flighty, the Notes application, or Notability, these are all different apps that will be able to take advantage of that new interactability, if that's even a word. But you can see that Apple, from a native standpoint, has been able to add things like the Music app, been able to add things like the Home application in terms of widgets, so you can actually interact with this in real time. So if I press on this, it'll turn off the light. If I press on this, it will turn off the light, or vice versa. So that's always great to see, adding a little bit more customization at a glance. But as you can see on here, there are some new widgets overall, like for instance, the new cleaner widget. So you can see the grid forecast to let you know when cleaner energy is being used. You do have the new App Store widget. You have the reminders, which you can interact with. So if I add this, scroll up, then you can just tack that off. So reminders allows you to interact with it. So again, play around with the widgets, play around with third-party applications and those widgets, and you'll see that there are some new updates with the widgets on iPadOS 17. Now, one of my favorite new updates is that Apple finally brought the Health app over to iPadOS 17. And I don't know why Apple didn't do this sooner, because again, look at the canvas that you have to play with. There's so much information, so much data that you can see at a glance. And I'm a big user of the actual Health app. I love having all this data at a glance. You can see 12,000 steps, and it's not anything crazy that it's doing. It's just giving you all the information, but on your iPad, and it syncs directly. Whatever happens on your Apple Watch will now be shown on your iPad. So you got your trends, you have your show all health data if you want to see, and look at all this information you can see at a glance, which is awesome. So again, you can see your VO2 max, your resting heart rate, your total activity for the day, and it finally syncs so well with the Apple Fitness app. So if I click on activity, you get to see exactly what's going on here. So now the last thing I want Apple to add is a fitness widget to kind of complete that ecosystem. So now the next thing I want to touch on is the actual Notes application. So if I go into Notes, Apple added a couple of new actual tools in their actual toolkit. First off, highly recommend getting yourself a little pencil grip right here. Not sponsored, but Paperlike makes some good ones. But you can see down here that we got a couple of new pencil grips. So the first one is, or pencil tools, the first one is the watercolor. So watercolor, and what I love about it is just how realistic it is. So you can see that I'm kind of just slightly working on it, and then if I press harder, it really starts to show up. And even if you guys have ever used watercolors back in the day, if you just I remember pressing on here, it would just kind of show up a little bit more and more and more and more and more and more and more. So I don't know, I like the actual usability and just how realistic it is. Apple does such a good job of being able to show us exactly how realistic it could be. And obviously you can change the sizes of it. So if I click on here, I can make it really thin and it does the same effect. I can sign my name, which is great to see. And then we also got the calligraphy pen. So this makes any pen look really, really nice. You can see that I'm kind of writing on there. And again, you can change it to different sizes. So if I make it medium, this is my signature, which is very cool. So if you are into calligraphy writing, this is now a great digital way of doing that. Kudos to Apple for bringing that over. And again, it's just part of the toolkit and the arsenal that you can now play with. So another kind of new feature, not really a feature, just a different, way that you can do this. So if you go into your tools and you press on this little A tool right here, that A tool is so whenever you handwrite something, it'll turn into text automatically. So now before, you wouldn't be able to just write anywhere with that handwriting tool and then convert it to text. You'd have to kind of scroll down, go to an empty section. But now, let's say if I'm on here and I just want to spell out hello, it now shows up pretty much anywhere that I write it, which I think is awesome. So if you do want to combine actual watercolor or handwriting with actual text and stuff like that, you can now do so directly on the Notes app. Another thing Apple is great at doing is pretty much cannibalizing other third-party applications. So you know that we have PDF editors everywhere. Apple decided to kind of put that into the Notes app and have that option and feature be there natively. So here you can see that we have a PDF. So now we have a new view of seeing this PDF that you can now edit in real time. So if I want to like sign something, I just click on the tool set right there, go here, and then just start to sign. You know, I can do whatever I want. I can annotate. I can do it in real time. You know, I can move with 2 fingers. I can start to sign my name everywhere. You can actually share it and show all these changes in real time. You also have some options over here with this drop down, so I can view as small. I can view as medium, which gives you a different view. And then obviously you can view as large, which we saw in a second. So that is what the large one looks like. And then you also have a quick look that lets you even see it more as a PDF editor. You also have the autofill tool over here. So if there are situations where you do have to autofill, it'll help you autofill and write directly on there, which is great to see. So being able to have a PDF editor that works easily and works natively now, again, you can add signature, add text form box, very self-explanatory, very easy to use. Now it's not super robust, and there's probably some other features that PDF editors have already, but this one, if you just need to sign something or fill out like a W-9 or fill out some, you know, parent permission slip, this is now so much easier to do than it used to be with a PDF editor built directly into the actual application itself. And then another small thing that we did notice is that the actual magnifier, so if you hold on and press here, the magnifier animation just looks a little bit different. It gives you kind of a wider circle to look at, and it's a little bit more accurate. So I like this being there as a new feature. And I don't know if you guys remember the app Freeform, but Freeform came out last year with iPadOS 16, and people seem to really like it. It was supposed to be this kind of endless canvas, like more so than the Notes application, this collaboration whiteboard tool that you can use with as many people as you want. So you do have some improved drawing, you can follow along with others, faster diagramming, and much more as it says on here. But some of the main things that I really noticed is the ability to now use perfect shapes. So if I want to press on this, and then let's say I want to create something like an org chart. So if I want to make a square here, I can make a perfect square, which is nice. So let's make something a little bit darker actually. Let's stop using that pencil. So I make a square here to kind of indicate that that's the boss, scroll down, then do one of these, and then a perfect circle, and then a perfect circle, and I can even do, like I said, a star before. So now bringing this over, which I really, really like, there's even a new one, which is a cloud. So if I do a cloud, it'll give you a nice kind of perfect looking cloud. So that is now coming over to Freeform, or it's now over at Freeform, which is great to see. Now, another big quality of life improvement that I've been talking about is Spotlight. So Spotlight got a lot smarter. So if I type in something like dog, or better yet, if I type in something like Shiba Inu, which is the type of dog that I have, it's now of course going to give you some search terms that you can go on Safari, but then it's going to give you the actual Siri knowledge, which is on here. Then it's going to look into my photos and show me all the pictures of a Shiba, but then it's also going to go into Google and find all the other pictures of a Shiba. So it's a little bit more kind of intuitive, it's a little bit smarter, it goes deeper into giving the information that you need, and then of course you can go down here and search in your notes, search in the App Store, and search in Maps. And then kind of in the similar vein as Spotlight, I'm not going to show you, but Siri got a little bit more conversational, so you were able to kind of speak to Siri and then also kind of give it context. So for instance, you can be like, what's the weather in California?
It's currently clear and 84 degrees in Sacramento, California.
Is it going to rain tomorrow?
It doesn't look like it's going to rain tomorrow in Sacramento, California.
So you can see that I'm able to speak to Siri and then have her kind of contextualize that I'm talking about California with that second question. So I no longer have to reiterate the question over and over again. I kind of have more of a normal conversation with Siri. Again, still not amazing, but quality of life improvements with Siri as well. So now I want to get into Safari a little bit. So if we go into Safari got a few actual new settings. So if we go into settings, scroll down to Safari, we actually have a few new things, something called profile. So profile is exactly what it sounds like. For instance, if you have a personal profile, you can create a work profile. So basically, you can save bookmarks in different web pages, certain profiles, and I can see this being used. So let's say you have an iPad Pro that gets shared around the house and you have multiple people using it. You know, what's to stop you from doing a profile for yourself, a profile for somebody else in the household, and keep those sign-ins for those people for easy access. So being able to use those profiles is great. And then again, if I go into Safari, and I go here, you can actually select your profiles by going here. So personal, you have a private, and then you have all the different profiles which are down here. And you can again name them and change them however you see fit. And again, you can kind of click on the profiles, click on the work one for instance, and then it's going to open a new page and you can see that it is a work profile. Another interesting one that was added is if I go into this button right here, and let's say I want to go to a private tab, by default, you actually have to lock private browsing. So turn on lock private browsing, and now the browsing or the private browsing will be locked behind your Face ID, which wasn't the case before. So if I want to get out of there, get out of here, go back to the work tab, and then I'm good to go. and now I'm going with whatever the work tab was before. And now lastly, before we get into some of the other features that are more exclusive to the iPad Pro, let's get into the actual multitasking. So multitasking got a new settings menu, so you do have the ability to now go into different modes. And again, it depends on which iPad you have to see which modes will show up. I'm using the M1 iPad Pro, so I get all of the features, which is nice, but you can have it off, you can go split view, or you can go into Stage Manager as some of your different variations. The new multitasking menu is great. So with iOS and iPadOS 17, we actually got some new FaceTime additions or some new FaceTime features, and it kind of reacts to some hand movements that you do. So if I do a heart, it shows little hearts. If I do 2 thumbs up, it'll do fireworks. You can also do a peace sign, and it should show up some balloons behind me and in front of me, which is kind of cool. So it kind of knows exactly where I am positionally, if that's even a word. Also, 2 peace signs, you should get confetti. So it's a nice little add-on. You also have 2 thumbs down for rain. Because you're sad, obviously. And then if you do the rocking sign or whatever, you get lasers. So some new things that came to FaceTime, and it's for iOS, iPadOS, and macOS. So now, let's get into Stage Manager. Stage Manager did get much improved, and now Stage Manager is going to be exclusive to the 2018 iPad Pro or newer. So it's got to have the A12X, the A12Z, the M1, or the M2. And then obviously the iPad Air with M1 can also use Stage Manager. So there aren't too many that can use it. And unless you have a 12.9-inch iPad Pro, I don't see it like with an 11-inch or even the 10.9-inch iPad Air. It's not productive enough. But all you do is you go down here, click on the Stage Manager icon in your control center, and now you have the ability to use something like Stage Manager. So if I go into Safari, it now opens in a windowed view. And the biggest quality of life improvement that I saw with this is the amount of variability that you have with these window sizes. So if I grab this right here and make it a second window, you can see that now I can actually move it a little bit bigger and into smaller increments. Before you only had like 6 or 7 increments, so Safari can now be in a small tiny little size, and you can see that you have all this variability. So what's nice is that if I drag in another app, it does open up in the center. So it's no longer kind of taking up space and kind of moving everything around, but it's a little bit more intuitive of how it actually works. And you can click on stuff on the side as well, click over here, move this over if I want to. So it seems very easy to use. But again, the biggest thing, and you're not really going to notice it until you actually play with it yourself, is the ability to move stuff around and the ability to have all that variability, which we didn't have before. Before it was very stringent, it was very clunky, it didn't work too well, it wasn't that intuitive, but now it seems to be very easy to use, at least in my opinion, which is great to have. And then when it comes to that side view of applications, everything else has stayed relatively the same. So if I open up another Safari tab, I could just press the plus sign here, open up that Safari tab, and then pull this over. You can see that all this has stayed relatively the same. You can still only have 4 applications at once, and they kind of move over as you see fit. And you can have technically up to 20 apps open at the same time, because you can go 4, 4, 4, 4, and then 4 on the screen itself. And then technically you can have a YouTube picture-in-picture open, or any other picture-in-picture. So you can have up to 21 apps working in real time, which is great. So now that we're done with this, let's move on and actually plug this into an external monitor and finish up this video and talk to you guys about external monitor support. So the first thing I do want to mention is that if you do have an iPad that supports external monitor support, you still need to have a peripheral plugged in. So I'm going to plug in this iPad without any peripherals and show you what happens on that second screen. So I am plugged in, and it should just mirror the screen. So you can see that external monitor support is showing up, and it is just mirroring the screen like it used to, which is very, very annoying, but you can see that it still works in this fashion. It's just you need to have either a Bluetooth mouse or a Bluetooth keyboard, or, which I'm going to show you in a second, the Magic Keyboard to kind of put you into that mode of external monitor support, which I'm going to show you right now. So now you can see that I plugged back in, and it should show me external display and Stage Manager is on, and then now I have true extended monitor support because I've connected to a Magic Keyboard. So the iPad kind of recognizes that I'm on a Magic Keyboard, and it knows to kind of spit up that real external display and treat it as its own OS. So if I click on Safari here, it's going to open the same apps I had open before, but now you have it up here. And again, this is where Stage Manager really shines because it feels way better. It kind of immediately goes to the correct resolution. I am connected via a Thunderbolt cable to a CalDigit hub, which is awesome, the TS4 I believe it is, and then that's connected with another Thunderbolt cable to this BenQ monitor, so it's treated in the full 4K, the aspect ratio and the resolution is exactly what it needs to be, and this is where things get really awesome because then I can just full screen actual things like LumaFusion and be able to work with LumaFusion in a full screen manner and then still use my iPad down here as an iPad. So I think that's great, and being able to use it that way is amazing. And then you still have your 3 dots up here to navigate everything. So enter full screen, add another window, minimize, move to iPad. So if I enter full screen, you can see that it gets nice and big and very easy to use. Now, a few more things to mention. First, so Apple added the ability to use an external webcam. Now, for now, it only works with FaceTime, and I'm sure third-party applications will be able to kind of hopefully adopt this at some point. But if you have a DSLR, or if you just have a USB camera, or whatever the case may be, you no longer have to use the selfie camera. You can just use whatever you see fit and actually use it as a FaceTime camera. One thing that hasn't been fixed is the audio issue. So if you want to have audio playing, you have to make sure that your monitor has an audio source. So if there's no built-in speakers to your monitor, you will not be able to hear anything coming out of the iPad, because for some reason, even though these speakers are amazing, these quad speakers on the iPad, Apple doesn't allow you to default to the iPad speakers when you're plugged in. So you either have to have a monitor with built-in speakers, or have yourself a hub with an auxiliary jack to allow you to use external speakers, or just use your AirPods Pro or any other Bluetooth speaker or Bluetooth headphones in order to kind of work around that. But it is very, very sad that that isn't possible. And then another question a lot of people usually have is, does it work in clamshell mode? If I close this up, unfortunately, it does not go into clamshell mode, but when I open it up, it does give you a nice lock screen. So the lock screen is down here, and it does give you kind of like a wallpaper screen, but there is a little bit of a workaround. So if you go into your display and brightness settings and turn off lock and unlock and then close it, then technically, if you have an external mouse, you can go into clamshell mode, but it's not really clamshell mode or a native clamshell mode, but it still works if that's something that you want to get into. And I have a separate video kind of going into an iPad Pro kind of workstation setup, which is amazing. But overall, iPadOS 17, quality of life improvements, make it feel more like a computer. I'm curious to see what Apple does moving forward, and something that we're still missing is a journaling applications, which is something to take into consideration. But that's going to do it. Let's finish up this video. So that's going to wrap up this video. Leave a comment down below of some of the new things that you liked about iPadOS 17, maybe some things that are still missing from your iPadOS experience overall. Leave a comment down below of which iPad you updated to iPadOS 17. I'm always very curious to know how you guys use your iPad on a day-to-day basis, but my favorite feature, or I guess, again, it's not really a feature, it's just how the iPad is now acting, is the amount of variability you have with the window sizing, with Stage Manager, and then also with extended monitor support. It makes you feel like it's a lot more free-flowing, it makes you feel like you're using a computer instead of an iPad. And I think the way that Apple's kind of attacking multitasking on the iPad, they had to do it differently than macOS because they had to do it the iPad way, but I like how they're actually bringing it and making it a little bit more familiar overall. But that has to be my absolute favorite update or upgrade to Stage Manager and to iPadOS. But that is going to do it for this video, everybody. If you made it to the end of this video, leave a dolphin in the comments below, because that means that you made it all the way to the end and I didn't bore you with all these features. But if you guys want to watch some more iPadOS, macOS, or iOS content, I know that Jeff is cooking up some nice iOS, tvOS, and macOS content, so definitely go watch that right after this video. And until next time, I'm Fernando. I'm out of here, everybody. Peace. Stay tuned for some iPhone content coming real soon.